Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Wa la udwana illa ala al-zalimin. Wa la aqibatu lil muttaqin. Allahumma salli wa sallim wa barik ala abdika wa rasulika Muhammadin sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. Wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa sallam tasliman kathira. So for those of you that are tuning in for the first time, essentially what we've covered so far, we talked about the definition of what it means to be under the shade of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala on the Day of Judgment. And we also mentioned that there are going to be various categories. So typically we restrict them to 7, the hadith of the 7, but in reality the Prophet ﷺ has mentioned many more other than those 7 that will be under the shade of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala on the Day of Judgment. However, we started with the hadith of the 7, and we covered last week the first 2 categories. And we covered Imamun Adil, which is a just ruler. And we also covered a young person, a young man or a young woman that grew up in the worship of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, grew up worshipping Allah azza wa jalla. And we said that youth is any age between 15 and 40 in the Sharia. We gave the evidences for that last week. And there's also a very logical sequence here. So again, Imamun Adil, the just ruler. The just ruler creates a society in which so many good things can happen. And then after you have Imamun Adil, you have young people that are likely to grow up worshipping Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Obviously, if they grow up worshipping Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, where are they going to worship Allah azza wa jalla? They're going to worship in the masajid of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So that's the 3rd category. And then the 4th category, they will meet people in the masjid, and they will have brothers and sisters in the masjid, and so they would love others only for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And then the 5th category, when they are approached by their desires, by a beautiful man or a woman of wealth and status and beauty, they would say, I fear Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And then after that, just as they've established their public righteousness, it makes it easier for them to give sadaqah when they are all alone. So the right hand gives sadaqah without the left hand even knowing, and they cry even when they're all alone, when they remember Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So you fix that which is great, you fix the leadership, and then everything else falls into place, and there's this progression now. And today we're going to start with number 3, category 3, which is a person who the Prophet ﷺ said, whose heart is attached to the masjid. Now keep in mind here, this is something very important, that it applies to both men and women. So this isn't necessarily just about salah, as-salah al-fariḍah, or the mandatory prayers. This is a person who loves the masjid, a person whose heart is attached to the masjid. There are 2 understandings that the scholars have of this. And Imam ibn Hajar rahimahullah ta'ala, he said that one opinion from the scholars is that what's meant here is not necessarily the masjid as in the place where people come and gather to pray. Rather, it could mean the place of salah. So if you have a masjid in your house per se, even though it's not really a masjid that has all the technical rulings, but you miss that place. And so he said, some scholars, they said that what it means is you miss your place of salah. You miss your prayer. You can't wait to get back to your place of prayer whenever you're distracted by it. And he said that, some of the proof of that is as in the case of Hafsa bin Sirin. Hafsa bin Sirin, radiyallahu ta'ala anha, the sister of the famous Imam ibn Sirin, rahimahullah ta'ala, she used to have a masjid in her house. And subhanAllah, Ibn Hajar rahimahullah, he says that for 30 years, she stayed in that masjid, in her house, all day worshipping Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and she would only come out to fulfill her needs and do what she had to do, and sleep, and then she'd go back to her masjid in the house. And so this was described as a masjid in that sense. The ulama, they also say that the proof of that would be the hadith of Abu Sa'id al-Khudri radiyallahu ta'ala anhu, that the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam said, an authentic hadith in At-Tirmidhi, جُعِلَتْ لِي الْأَرْضُ مَسْجِدًا وَطَهُورًا, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has made the entire earth a masjid and a place of wudu for me, except for the graveyard and the bathroom. So they said that what's being specified here is not necessarily the masjid. However, that's the weaker opinion. The reason being is that the Prophet ﷺ is mentioning the heart being attached to it, and in one of the narrations, the Prophet ﷺ says, and this hadith is from Abu Hurairah radiyallahu ta'ala anhu in Sahih Muslim, وَرَجُلٌ مُعَلَّقٌ بِالْمَسْجِدِ إِذَا خَرَجَ مِنْهُ حَتَّى يَعُودَ إِلَيْهِ, that it's a man whose heart is attached, a person whose heart is attached to the masjid whenever he leaves it until he returns to it. Meaning what? Even though you're not in the masjid throughout the day or throughout the week or throughout the month, whenever you're outside of the masjid, you can't wait to get back to the masjid. And so it's actually referring to a place here. And obviously the Prophet ﷺ said also in the hadith in Sahih Muslim, أَحَبُّ الْبِلَادِ إِلَى اللَّهِ الْمَسَاجِدِ. The most beloved places to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala on the face of the earth are the masajid, and the most hated places on the face of the earth are the marketplaces. Rasulullah ﷺ, he also said in a hadith, authentic hadith that's narrated by Abu Nu'aym, he said, sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, al-masjid baytu kulli mu'min. This is a beautiful hadith. The masjid is the home of every believer. Okay? Now notice that the Prophet ﷺ here did not specify man or woman, young or old. The Prophet ﷺ said it is the home of every single believer. And Imam ibn Hajar rahimahullah, he said this includes women as well. And he said the proof of that, if you look at the way the Prophet ﷺ prohibited the men from prohibiting their wives from going to the masjid, Rasulullah ﷺ says, لا تمنعوا إماء الله مساجد الله. Do not forbid the female worshippers of Allah from the houses of Allah. So the Prophet ﷺ did not say, do not forbid the women from the masajid. He said, don't forbid the female worshippers of Allah from the houses of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You know, and the wording of that shows that this is the home of their master. And so they will also feel an attachment to it. And so the Prophet ﷺ prohibited the Sahaba from stopping their wives. In fact, we find Abdullah bin Omar radiallahu anhu, he had a son by the name of Bilal. And Bilal, ironically, by the way, this is just a tangent, when Bilal was born, he had a mark on his face. So they thought that he was going to be Umar ibn Abdul Aziz. Because Umar ibn Khattab radiallahu anhu had this dream of a child from his dhurriya, from his offspring, with a mark on his face that would be that would bring justice back to this earth. And so when Bilal was born, he had a mark on his face. They thought maybe he's the one. But Bilal grew up, the son of Abdullah ibn Umar radiallahu anhu, very harsh. And particularly, he would forbid his wife from going to the masjid. And Abdullah ibn Umar radiallahu anhu told him that the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, لا تمنعوا إماء الله مساجد الله. Do not forbid the female worshippers of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala from the houses of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And Bilal responded to him and said, I am going to forbid her. And Abdullah ibn Umar responded and he said, I'm telling you, the Prophet ﷺ said not to. And you're saying you're going to forbid her? And he said, I'm going to boycott you until you allow your wife to go to the masjid. So he actually, subhanAllah, took it so seriously to where he boycotted his son so that his son would allow his wife to go to the masjid. So it is the house of every believer. Every single person in the family should feel an attachment, should feel an inclination towards the masjid. The youth should feel an inclination towards the masjid. They should have their hearts attached to it. And as we said in the previous lectures, that the prophets are found within each of these categories. So we find that the Anbiya of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the prophets, are found in every category. So here, for example, Zakaria alayhi salam. Zakaria alayhi salam, as the Prophet ﷺ says, Kana Najjar in al-Bukhari. He says he was a carpenter and he used to eat from his daily earnings from his hand. And he used to, as a carpenter, he built the mihrab for Maryam alayhi salam. And he used to always, Kana yulazim al-masjid. One of the descriptions of Zakaria alayhi salam is that he was always in the masjid. You know, any free moment that he had, he went to the masjid. And in fact, the moment where he asked for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for a son, he prayed Qiyamul Layl in the masjid, in the corner of the masjid, calling upon Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, asking for that son. And of course, the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam himself, the way the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam loved the masjid, you know, to where even in his last days, alayhi salatu wasalam, Aisha radiallahu anha says that when he was dying, the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam had a severe fever. So he would ask Aisha radiallahu anha, Asalla nas, have the people prayed yet, O Aisha? And Aisha radiallahu anha, she would say that, Yantadirunak, they're waiting for you, O Messenger of Allah. So the Prophet ﷺ would get up and he would faint because of how severe his fever was. And then he'd wake up ﷺ, and right away he would ask, Asalla nas, did the people pray? And Aisha radiallahu anha says, I told him, Ya Rasulullah, they're waiting for you. So he got up and he fainted again, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And she said that he went through this 3 times. And then on the 4th time he got up and he asked the question, and he realized that he was about to faint again. So the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam called 2 of the companions. And the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he put his arms around their shoulders. And Aisha radiallahu anha says that the Prophet ﷺ couldn't even stand on his own 2 feet, to the point that as they dragged him ﷺ, his feet left 2 lines in the sand. SubhanAllah, that was how important it was to the Prophet ﷺ to pray in jama'ah, to go to the masjid. And even, of course, the last moments of the Prophet ﷺ, where he opened the curtain and he saw his companions praying, and he smiled, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, but he was never able to come out again. And we find, even Omar ibn al-Khattab radiallahu ta'ala anhu, where Omar radiallahu ta'ala anhu, he says, or rather you see Omar radiallahu ta'ala anhu, as he's dying, even as he drinks his milk, if he drinks anything, if he drinks milk, it comes out of his stomach, because that's how badly he was stabbed, radiallahu ta'ala anhu. Whenever he'd come back to consciousness, the only thing he would ask for is, did the people pray? And did I miss my prayer? And he wanted to go to the masjid, radiallahu ta'ala anhu. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He says in Surah An-Nur, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, فِي بُيُوتٍ أَذِنَ اللَّهُ أَن تُرْفَعَ وَيُذْكَرَ فِيهَا اسْمُ اللَّهِ يُسَبِّحُ لَهُ فِيهَا بِالْغُدُوِّ وَالْآصَالِ. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, there are such houses, homes, buyut, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has ordered to be raised, and His name be mentioned therein, exalting Him within them in the morning and in the evenings. And subhanAllah, the ulama, they say here, look how Allah Azza wa Jalla called the masjid Bayt. Allah called the masjid Buyut. And the Prophet ﷺ said it's the home of every mu'min, حتى يعني أن المؤمن لا يشعر في الراحة إلا إن كان في المسجد. The believer never really feels pure sakina, tranquility in his heart, until he's in the masjid. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that Allah is being praised within the masjid bil-ghuduwi wal-asal, meaning morning and evening. So the masjid is supposed to be alive the entire day. SubhanAllah, we find that in the time of the Prophet ﷺ, Rasulullah ﷺ said that the hardest salah for the hypocrites is Fajr and Isha. Why? Because it was dark, no one would see them anyway, so they wouldn't really get the props for coming to the masjid. Nowadays, you see Fajr and Isha, mashallah, masjid is packed, the lights are on, Dhuhr, Asr, Maghrib, where is everybody? Right? So the masjid is meant to be a place where Allah Azza wa Jal is glorified throughout the day. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, رِجَالٌ لَا تُلْهِيهِمْ تِجَارَةٌ وَلَا بَيْعٌ لا تلههم تجارة ولا بيع عن ذكر الله وإقام الصلاة وإيتاء الزكاة يخافون يوما تتقلب فيه القلوب والأبصار. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says there are people in there that are not distracted by their businesses nor by their sales. And subhanAllah, what the ulama they say here is that a tijara has doubt in it. Your business has doubt. You may or may not make profit. Bay' has certainty in it. Meaning even certain sales, you would forego those for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That they're not distracted by that. As they come to the masjid, they're not distracted from the remembrance of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And Allah Azza wa Jalla says that they fear a day in which the hearts and the eyes will fearfully turn about in front of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. What this means is, they're more concerned with the ultimate day of meeting Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala than with their petty business deals here and there, an extra dollar here or there. Now subhanAllah, here we find this idea of qalb, of a person whose qalb, whose heart is constantly attached to the masjid. All of us might have met people like that. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to make us amongst them. Allahumma ameen. That they just will not miss salat and jama'ah. Particularly, there's one brother that's very dear to me, and I won't say his name because I think he's probably watching the lecture. And this brother, subhanAllah, used to come every single day, an hour before Salatul Fajr. When I was in New Orleans, opened the masjid, and subhanAllah, would not miss Salat and Jama'ah. He owned his business, he would not miss Salat and Jama'ah. And subhanAllah, we never even needed to know what a key of the masjid looked like while he was around. But he had some issues, and subhanAllah, he went to prison on some false charges. And subhanAllah, that's when we started to ask each other, who has the key to the masjid? And what he was concerned about, even with his trial day, he was saying, will I have the chance to go and pray Salatul Fajr that day in the masjid? There are people like that have that quality. One of the most special people in the world, and I know that a small video came out about him from Sheikh Walid describing him when Sheikh Walid Bassiouni came to visit Baton Rouge, Louisiana. And there's a masjid there with a very unique name. And so we told him the story of that masjid. And some of you may even know that brother, have heard of that brother. There was a convert brother by the name of Abdul Raqib. And Brother Abdul Raqib, subhanAllah, I remember when he became Muslim, he used to wear a stove, and he used to wear his turban, and he used to deliver newspapers. So subhanAllah, we used to see him delivering newspapers. And that's in Louisiana, by the way. I know we're in Texas, but that's in Louisiana. They're delivering newspapers at people's doors, always with the biggest smile on his face, so much nur. SubhanAllah, brother never wanted to miss salat in the masjid. And he used to ask even the kids, he used to say, make dua that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala allows me to die in the masjid. And subhanAllah, one day, there's some brothers that came from out of town, and they had a flat tire. He took them to the mechanic, fixed their tire, and he hosted them, and he slept with them in the masjid. And a man walks into the masjid that night, and he wakes him up in the middle of the night, and he tells him, get up, we have to go do bay'ah, we have to go give our allegiance to the Khalifa. He says, what are you talking about? The man was crazy. He says, what are you talking about? He says, get up, we have to go do bay'ah to the Khalifa. So as he was getting up slowly, the man told him, he had a gun in his hand, he told him, say your prayers. So he said, Ashhadu an la, he put up his finger, he said, Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah, wa ashhadu anna Muhammadan Rasulullah, and the man shot him in the head, and he died in the masjid. And the masjid now is named Masjid Abdul Raqib. If you ever go to Baton Rouge, Louisiana, there is a masjid called Masjid Abdul Raqib. Now it looks bad to us, subhanAllah, a brother that was killed, but subhanAllah, what more do you want than that? What more do you want? To die in i'tikaf in the masjid. And so he was truthful with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. His heart was tied to the masjid, and all he ever wanted was to die in the masjid. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala granted him that wish. So there's a special tie that a person's heart should have to the masjid. And there are various ahadith about the virtues. Rasulullah said, whoever prays 40 days in the masjid, not missing takbiratul ihram, not missing the opening takbir, every single salah in jama'ah, without missing the opening takbir, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will forgive him, and Allah will free him from hypocrisy. And nifaq, hypocrisy, has been taken out of this person's heart. Rasulullah also said in a hadith from Abu Sa'id al-Khudri radiallahu ta'ala anhu in Sunan al-Tirmidhi, it's a hadith that's hasan and gharib. The Prophet said, إِذَا رَأَيْتُمُ الرَّجُلَ if you see a man, يَتَعَاهَدُ الْمَسْجِدِ if you see this person who's constantly coming to the masjid, فَاشْهَدُوا لَهُ بِالْإِيمَانِ then you should bear witness that this is a person of Iman. فَإِنَّ اللَّهَ تَعَالَى يَقُولُ that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, and the Prophet recited verse number 18 from Surah At-Tawbah, إِنَّمَا يَعْمُرُ مَسَاجِدَ اللَّهِ مَنْ آمَنَ بِاللَّهِ وَالْيَوْمِ الْآخِرِ وَأَقَامَ الصَّلَاةَ وَآتَى الزَّكَاةَ وَلَمْ يَخْشَ إِلَّا اللَّهِ فَعَسَى أُولَٰئِكَ أَن يَكُونُوا مِنَ الْمُهْتَدِينَ. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that verily in the masajid are those who maintain the masajid, those who are always in the masjid, are those who believe in Allah and the last day, and they establish the prayers, and they give the zakat, and they don't fear except for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and verily it is expected. Now not everyone that comes to the masjid is going to be min al-muhtadeen, right? There are going to be hypocrites, obviously. But Allah Azza wa Jalla says, فَعَسَى أُولَٰئِكَ أَن يَكُونُوا مِنَ الْمُهْتَدِينَ. It's expected that those people will be from those that are guided and righteous. What that means is that it is essential, if you want to be guided, that the masjid has to play a pivotal role in your life. It has to play a central role in your life. It doesn't mean everyone in the masjid will be guided, but there is no way that you could claim to have a strong relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala without having that strong relationship with the masajid of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And there are various ahadith. We have the reward of going to the masjid, right? The Prophet ﷺ, he said specifically on the day of Jum'ah that whoever performs ghusl, and he comes early to the masjid, and he sits near the imam. Everyone when they come to Jum'ah in particular, where do they look for? The wall, right? Get the most comfortable seat in the house. He sits near to the imam. So he's attentive. That's what the meaning of this is. And he doesn't engage in idle talk. As people are waiting for Jum'ah, what are they doing? Are they waiting for the salah? They're talking about things unrelated. So he doesn't engage in idle talk. The Prophet ﷺ said, for every single step, كَانَ لَهُ بِكُلِّ خُطْوَةٍ with every single step that he takes towards the masjid, عَمَلُ سَنَةٍ صِيَامُهَا وَقِيَامُهَا. He will have a year's worth of siyam, fasting, and a year's worth of qiyamul layl. Listen to this hadith, which is from Abu Umama radiallahu ta'ala anhu and Abu Dawood, and the hadith is authentic. The Prophet ﷺ said, مَنْ خَرَجَ مِنْ بَيْتِهِ إِلَى صَلَاةٍ مَكْتُوبَةٍ. Whoever goes out from his house to a mandatory prayer,
فَأَجْرُهُ أَجْرُ الْحَاجِ الْمُحْرِمِ. His reward is the reward of one who's in ihram doing hajj. وَمَنْ خَرَجَ إِلَى تَسْبِيحِ الضُّحَى لَا يَنْصِبُهَا إِلَّا إِيَّاهُ فَأَجْرُهُ كَأَجْرِ الْمُعْتَمِرِ. And whoever shows up at some point in the day, al-duha is like between the sunrise and the dhuhr prayer. He shows up in the daytime just to offer 2 rak'ahs and remember Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Then he has the reward of umrah. وَصَلَاتٍ. This is one that wallahi should make us all feel good about attending halaqas, especially those of us who are here and present, alhamdulillah, and that are here on a nightly basis, for all the halaqas in the masjid here on, during the week. وَصَلَاتٍ عَلَى إِثْرِ صَلَاتٍ لَا لَغْوَ بَيْنَهُمَا كِتَابٌ فِي عِلِّيِّينَ. And the Prophet ﷺ said that the one who sits in the masjid between 2 prayers without speaking about nonsense, without engaging in idle talk, is written with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the illiyin, in the high registers, the people of Al-Jannah. So subhanallah, the benefit. In Tibar al-Salah, Rasulullah said, waiting for the Salah after the Salah is a kafara, is an expiation between the 2 Salah. So it's a blessing, especially when you go to the masjid and you've got a halaqah between Maghrib and Isha, for example, or between 2 salawat, because you get that reward also in the process. Rasulullah also said in the hadith of Abu Hurairah radiallahu ta'ala anhu in Sahih al-Bukhari, he said, "Man ghada ila al-masjidi wa raha." Whoever goes to the masjid during the morning and in the afternoon. Rasulullah says, أَعَدَّ اللَّهُ لَهُ نُزُلَهُ مِنَ الْجَنَّةِ كُلَّمَا غَدَى أَوْ رَاحَ. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives him an honorable place in Jannah. He builds him a home in Jannah with good hospitality every single morning and every single afternoon when he goes to the masjid. There are many different ahadith, and the Prophet ﷺ, he told, Banu Salima, when they wanted to move closer to the masjid, I know that's the thing, let's be as close to the masjid as possible. The Prophet ﷺ, he said, Diyarukum, diyarukum, stay in your homes, meaning don't come too close. He says, Tuktabu atharukum. Your footsteps are being written down, they're being recorded with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. When Allah Azza wa Jalla says in the Quran, وَنَكْتُبُ مَا قَدَّمُوا وَآثَارُهُم, that we write down the good deeds that they presented as well as their steps towards the masjid. And of course the Prophet ﷺ mentioned the reward of building a masjid. He said alayhi salatu wasalam in the hadith of Jabir radiallahu ta'ala anhu, مَنْ بَنَى مَسْجِدًا لِلَّهِ كَمِفْحَسِ قَطَاةٍ أَوْ أَصْغَرٍ. Whoever builds a masjid for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala the size of a bird's nest or even less than that, بَنَى اللَّهُ لَهُ بَيْتًا فِي الْجَنَّةِ. Allah will build him a home in paradise as well. And of course even cleaning the masjid is ibadah. It's a sunnah to clean the masjid. Where the Prophet ﷺ, he asked about the woman that passed away, or the woman that used to clean the masjid, where she was. And he said, Ya Rasulullah, she passed away and we didn't want to bother you, we just prayed janazah on her. And the Prophet ﷺ cared enough about that woman to go and to redo the janazah for her. SubhanAllah, that woman is a legend. What is the ibadah of cleaning the masjid? In the professional world, we've gotten so used to professionalism that we always expect, masjid has a janitor, there's someone who's going to come clean it up anyway. But it's your ajr. It's your ajr. That person might be paid for it. But when you see an opportunity to clean the masjid or beautify the masjid, then do so. That's an ibadah, that's an act of worship from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Now, the transition into the next category, in the masjid, you make friendships and relationships, and you meet people who love Allah, and so you start to love one another for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Right? How many of us made our closest friends through Islamic activities and through the masajid of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and through these organizations and institutions and so on and so forth? Right? I always tell people, for example, the more that you share their ibadah with someone, the more that you'll love that person. So for example, even the people, ask those, I've been to Hajj alhamdulillah multiple times. Every single year, till now, I remember each and every single person that I went to Hajj with. Even though you only spend like 2 weeks with someone, but subhanAllah, you develop such a strong bond worshipping Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala together, you never forget your Hajj friends. Likewise, the best relationships are the ones that are made through Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, through the masjid. And this is my favorite category of them all, because this is the easiest category to achieve the shade of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Why? Al-mar'u ma'man ahab. You are with the one that you love. So even if you didn't fit into the other categories of those shaded by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, you loved someone who did, you're in the shade of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala on the Day of Judgment as well. And subhanAllah, there's a very beautiful story. Abu Idris al-Khawlani, radiallahu ta'ala anhu, he says, and this is in al-Muwatta of Malik, he says, one time I entered, he's from the Tabi'een, he said, one time I entered into a mosque in Damascus. And he said, I saw there a young man with a beautiful mouth and white teeth. So the Sahaba had good hygiene, by the way. Right? White teeth. That was sitting with some people. And he said, whenever they disagreed about something, they referred it to him and then they proceeded from his statement. So he said, I asked about him and they said, that is Mu'adh ibn Jabal radiallahu ta'ala anhu. So he said the next day, he said, I instantly fell in love with this person. So he said the next day, I went, to find him, so I went to the Dhuhr prayer, I went to the noon prayer. And I saw that he got there before me and he was already praying his sunnah. So he said, I waited for him till he finished his sunnah. And he said, then I walked up to him and I said to him, Assalamu alaikum. I greeted him. And I said to him, Wallahi inni la ahibbuka lillah. He said, I swear by Allah that I love you for Allah. فقال, Allah. Mu'adh radiallahu anhu, he looked at him and he said, by Allah. He said, by Allah. فقال, Allah. فقلت, Allah. He said, by Allah. He said, by Allah. And he said it 3 times and his voice got louder. He said, Allah. He said, you swear by Allah? He said, I swear by Allah. So Mu'adh radiallahu ta'ala anhu, he grabbed him and he embraced him. And he said, Abshir. He said, congratulations. He said, this is good news. He says, فَإِنِّي سَمِعْتُ رَسُولُ اللَّهِ صَلَّى اللَّهُ عَلَيْهِ وَسَلَّمْ يَقُولُ. He said, I heard the Messenger of Allah صلى الله عليه وسلم say, قَالَ اللَّهُ تَبَارَكَ وَتَعَالَى. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has said, وَجَبَتْ مَحَبَّتِي لِلْمُتَحَابِينَ فِي. That my love has been guaranteed for those who love each other for me. And Rasulullah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the hadith continues, فِي الْمُتَجَالِسِينَ فِي. Those who sit together for my sake. وَالْمُتَزَاوِرِينَ فِي. And those who visit each other for my sake. وَالْمُتَبَادِلِينَ فِي. And those who spend in my sake. That my love is guaranteed for those people. And this hadith is authentic, narrated by Imam Malik rahimahullah ta'ala. So, the beauties, the virtues of this. Number one, if you love or are loved for, or you are loved for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, it's a sign that Allah loves you. So that's the greatest thing about it all. If you are loved, then the hadith in al-Bukhari from Abu Hurairah radiallahu ta'ala anhu, that Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam says, Inna Allah idha habba abdan, when Allah loves someone, He calls Jibreel alayhi salam and He says, Ya Jibreel, verily I love this person, so you should love him too. So Jibreel loves him. And then Jibreel calls Ahl as-Sama, all of the inhabitants of the heavens. How many trillions of angels in the heavens? It says, Inna Allah yuhibbu fulan. Allah loves that person, so you should love him too. So they all love him too. And Rasulullah says, وَيُوضَعُ لَهُ الْقَبُولُ فِي أَهْلِ الْأَرْضِ. Then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala places the love of that person in the hearts of the people of the earth. Allah directs the hearts of people towards it. So if someone loves you for Allah, it's a sign bi'idhnillahi ta'ala that Allah loves you. And if you love someone for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, it's also a sign. Rasulullah said in a hadith in Sahih Muslim that a man set out to visit his brother in faith that lived in another town. Then Allah Azza wa Jal sent a malak, specifically an angel, to greet him on the way. So when the angel met him, the angel said to him, where are you going? Where do you intend to go? He said, I'm going to visit my brother so-and-so that lives in such and such place. So the angel said, have you done anything for him? Have you done any favor for him? He said, no. He said, has he done anything for you? He said, no. He said, I only want to visit him because I love him for Allah. The only reason I'm visiting him is for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, because I love him for Allah. So the angel responded and he said, فَإِنِّي رَسُولُ اللَّهِ إِلَيْكَ بِأَنَّ اللَّهَ قَدْ أَحَبَّكَ كَمَا أَحْبَبْتَهُ فِي اللَّهِ. So I was sent by Allah. I am a messenger of Allah to you to tell you that Allah loves you just as you loved him. Because you loved him only for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, then I also love you. The Prophet ﷺ also said in the hadith in At-Tirmidhi, مَنْ عَادَ مَرِيضًا أَوْ زَارَ أَخٍ لَهُ فِي اللَّهِ نَادَاهُ مُنَادٍ. That whoever visits a sick person or his brother for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, a caller calls out to him, أَنْ طِبْتَ وَطَابَ مَمْشَاكَ وَتَبَوَّأْتَ مِنَ الْجَنَّةِ مَنْزِلًا. That may you have goodness, and may your life be filled with good, and may you dwell in a home in paradise. May you dwell in a home in paradise. So this is what's interesting is that on the Day of Judgment, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala calls those people. Right? And this is something unique out of all of the categories. Allah calls those people who love each other for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And so Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam said in the hadith that's narrated by Mu'adh ibn Jabal, that قال الله عز وجل المتحابون في جلالي, that those who love each other for my sake, for the sake of my majesty, لهم منابر من نور, that they would have pulpits of light on the Day of Judgment. And you know, what we said in the beginning of this class is that those that have the shade under the sun, we find that they are the same people that have light whenever there is no light on the Day of Judgment. So Allah, you know, alternates between giving them shade and then giving them light when they need light. So they will have pulpits of light on the Day of Judgment. Now what's the interesting thing? Rasulullah says, يَغْبِطُهُمُ النَّبِيُّونَ وَالشُّهَدَاءُ. This is the odd part of the hadith. The prophets and the martyrs will envy them. The prophets and the shuhada will envy these people. In another hadith, the Prophet ﷺ said, and this is from Omar ibn Khattab radiallahu anhu and Abu Dawood, it's also authentic, that the Prophet ﷺ said, there are people from the servants of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala who are neither prophets nor martyrs. But the prophets and the martyrs will envy them on the Day of Judgment because of their rank with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And the people asked, who are they? Describe them, O Messenger of Allah. And Rasulullah ﷺ says that أُولَٰئِكَ قَوْمٌ, that they are a people تَحَابُوا بِرُوحِ اللَّهِ. This is an interesting part of the narration. They love each other in the spirit of Allah. What do the scholars of hadith say Ruh Allah means here? They say it means the Quran. They love each other for the Quran. Okay? And subhanAllah, you'll find that the most beloved scholars in history are always the scholars of Quran. And it's still true today. That the people that you love most are the people, let's say you have a Quran buddy, you memorize the Quran together, you love people for the Quran. So loving the Quran is the strongest way to love each other for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It's what obviously binds people across, you know, it transcends race, it transcends language, everything. It brings people together for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So the Prophet ﷺ says, تَحَابُوا بِرُوحِ اللَّهِ. And they don't have any mutual kinship, they don't give any property to one another. There is nothing that's between them except for that. And Rasulullah ﷺ said, I swear by Allah, their faces will be glowing, and they will be sitting on pulpits of light, and they will have no fear upon them when everyone else will have fear, and they will not grieve when everyone else is grieving. And then the Prophet ﷺ recited the ayah, أَلَا إِنَّ أَوْلِيَاءَ اللَّهِ لَا خَوْفٌ عَلَيْهِمْ وَلَا هُمْ يَحْزَنُونَ. That verily the friends of Allah will not have any fear, nor shall they grieve. Now the ulama, they say, what is the meaning of the prophets and the shuhada envying them? Because the prophets are still better than them, and the shuhada are still surely better than them. Some of them, what they said, is that out of all of the categories, these are the only people that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will ask about. Because the Prophet ﷺ said in a hadith from Abu Hurairah radiallahu ta'ala anhu in al-Bukhari, إِنَّ اللَّهَ تَبَارَكَ وَتَعَالَى يَقُولُ يَوْمَ الْقِيَامَةِ أَيْنَ الْمُتَحَابُونَ بِجَلَالِ. In the very beginning of the Day of Judgment, before the hisab is even started, before Allah even calls us to account, Allah says, where are those people that love each other for my sake? And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, الْيَوْمَ أَظِلُّهُمْ. That today, that I, not أَظِلُّهُم, أَظِلُّهُم, which means that I will give them shade. فِي ظِلِّ يَوْمَ لَا ظِلَّ إِلَّا ظِلِّي. Today I will give them a shade on a day when there is no shade except for my shade. So in the very beginning, before Allah speaks to anyone, Allah says, as the people are going and taking their spot on the Day of Judgment, where are those people that used to love each other for my sake? Just as they found shelter in one another for my sake, I will shelter them and shade them today. Some of the scholars, they said also the word ghibta, which means to envy, is a positive type of envy, meaning they don't wish bad for them. It's not like a hateful envy. It's it's a form of pride. They're happy for them even though they envy them. Sometimes you envy someone, but you're still happy for them. So they envy them, but they're still happy for them. Now we said anbiya, prophets are in every category. Can anyone think of, and we've got to be quick about this, can anyone think of two prophets in particular that fit into this category? Anybody? That lived together and that strengthened each other for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Can anyone think of two prophets that lived in this category? Yahya and Isa. Okay, Yahya and Isa. So we find Yahya and Isa, alayhimus salam. And by the way, there's more than one answer. Who Yahya and Isa used to make dua for one another. They used to support one another.
Yahya alayhi salam was only about 4 months older than Isa alayhi salam. So they were brothers in their da'wah as well. Who else? Musa and Harun. وَجَعَلْ لِي وَزِيرًا مِنْ أَهْلِي هَارُونَ أَخِي أُشْدُدْ بِهِ أَزْرِي وَأَشْرِكْهُ فِي أَمْرِي كَيْ نُسَبِّحَكَ كَثِيرًا وَنَذْكُرَكَ كَثِيرًا إِنَّكَ كُنْتَ بِنَا بَصِيرًا. Musa alayhi salam asked, "Oh Allah, make my prophet a brother too." And that's why Imam al-Baghawi rahimahullah, he said, no one has ever done a greater favor for anyone else than what Musa did for Harun. Because of his dua, Harun was made a prophet. Make him a brother for me. He was already his blood brother, but so that he can help me with my affair. He can help me in my da'wah. We can glorify you together. We can worship you together. We can remember you together. So that's the greatest example where they became brothers for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala as they were already blood brothers. The greatest two in this category undoubtedly are Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam and Abu Bakr as-Siddiq radiallahu anhu. No two people loved each other more than the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam and Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu. And I know you know those of you that are here, at least you've heard me read these beautiful words before, but Abu Bakr even would fall ill if the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam fell ill. Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu says, "مرض الحبيب فعدته فمرضت من وله عليه فعادني الحبيب في مرضي فبرئت من نظري إليه." He says that one time the Prophet ﷺ got sick, my beloved one became sick, so I got sick when I saw that he was sick. Then when the Prophet ﷺ got better, he came and he visited me, and when I saw that he was healthy, then I became cured as well. So the love that Abu Bakr and the Prophet ﷺ had for one another was so strong that Abu Bakr even got sick when the Prophet ﷺ got sick. So they are the best of the two. We also find that loving for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is part of Iman. And by the way, the scholars, they say that the reason why Allah asks about them on the Day of Judgment and not anyone else is because they asked about one another in this world for Allah and not anyone or anything else. You understand? So the only reason they asked for each other, or the only reason they desired each other's companionship in this world was for Allah. So the only reason Allah Azza wa Jalla will call them amongst everyone else is because they only cared about loving one another for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The Prophet ﷺ, he also said in the hadith of Abu Umam that loving one for Allah is part of Iman. Rasulullah ﷺ said in this hadith, which is narrated by Abu Dawood, he said, "Man ahabba lillah, wa abghada lillah, wa a'ta lillah, wa mana'a lillah, faqad istakmala al-iman." That whoever loves for Allah's sake, hates for Allah's sake, gives for Allah's sake, and withholds for Allah's sake, will have perfect Iman. Prophet ﷺ, he also mentioned that no one would taste the sweetness of Iman until three things are achieved. Until one of three things happens. Number one, that the one to whom Allah and His Messenger ﷺ are more dear to him than anything else. So he loves Allah and the Messenger ﷺ more than anything else. He loves a person only for Allah's sake. That's number two. And number three, he would hate to revert to kufr, to disbelief, just as he would hate to be thrown into a fire. And that hadith is in al-Bukhari. So it's a sign of Iman. So what about loving your wife or your husband? Can you love your mother for the sake of Allah? When's the last time you walked up to your wife and said, "By the way, sweetie, I just wanted to let you know I love you for the sake of Allah"? Right? Or when did you say that to your husband? You know? Or when do you say to your mother, "I love you for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala"? It's very odd, right? But is it possible to love them for the sake of Allah Azza wa Jalla? Yes. Al-Imam al-Nawawi rahimahullah ta'ala, he said that I love you for your love of Allah. And so the more you love Allah, the more I love you. And so if, for example, when you see your spouse, you see your family getting closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, your love for them naturally increases. Then that is a sign that you also love them for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Right? It can't solely be for Allah Azza wa Jalla, because there obviously are benefits and things of that sort and blessings and favors exchanged. But at the same time, you love them for Allah because you see them grow in Iman. Nothing should make you happier as a husband or a wife than seeing your wife or your husband praying Qiyamul Layl, or observing one of the things that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has made mandatory upon her. The last thing is loving the Prophet ﷺ, his family, his companions, the scholars, the righteous, etc. All these groups of people for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Why? Because again, أَنْتَ مَعْ مَنْ أَحْبَبْتَ. You will be raised with the one that you love. So even though they're not necessarily in your age, you still love them. And Imam al-Shafi'i rahimahullah has the very beautiful poem. He says, أُحِبُّ الصَّالِحِينَ وَلَسْتُ مِنْهُمْ لَعَلِّي أَنْ أَنَالَ بِهِمْ شَفَاعَةً وَأَكْرَهُ مَنْ تِجَارَتُهُ الْمَعَاصِي وَإِنْ كُنَّا سَوِيًّا فِي الْبِضَاعَةِ. That I love the righteous even though I don't consider myself to be righteous.
Because perhaps on the Day of Judgment, I'll benefit from their intercession. And I hate those that trade in evil, even though we have the same inventory. Alright, so subhanAllah, loving the ulama, loving the righteous people, is a way that inshallah ta'ala you can draw close to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala on the Day of Judgment, because you will be with the one whom you love. And that's why the Prophet ﷺ, one time when he was asked, Mata sa'a, when is the hour? The Prophet ﷺ responded, Mada a'dat laha, what did you prepare for it? And he said, nothing except that I love Allah and His Messenger ﷺ. Prophet ﷺ said, then you're good. Anta ma'man ahbab. You're with the one that you love. Anas ibn Malik radiallahu anhu was there. And he said, I was so happy when I heard this, because I said to myself, I love the Prophet ﷺ, I love Abu Bakr, and I love Omar. So I'm good. You know? But I'm set on the Day of Judgment, because I really love these three people. So subhanAllah, who do you want to be with? And so there are different ahadith. For example, the Prophet ﷺ, talking about loving Ahlul Bayt. So he said, the one who loves, the hadith in Sahih Muslim, when he held Al-Hasan radiallahu anhu and said that I love him, and that you love him, and love the one that loves him, meaning Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The Prophet ﷺ talking about Al-Hasan and Al-Husayn, the Prophet ﷺ holding Usama ibn Zayd radiallahu ta'ala anhu, and Al-Hasan on both of his legs, and saying, Oh Allah, love the one who loves them. The hadith in Al-Bukhari and Muslim, when the Prophet ﷺ said about the Ansar, from Al-Bara radiallahu anhu, only a believer loves them and only a hypocrite hates them. Loving the Sahaba, all of these different ahadith where the Prophet ﷺ talked about loving the righteous amongst the scholars, the Salaf. This is a means, inshallah ta'ala, of us getting close to them. That's why, by the way, I tell everyone, whenever you read a book, make sure you read about the scholar, because then you'll connect maybe with the scholar. You might love Ibn Taymiyyah, you might love Imam al-Ghazali, you might love Ibn Rajab, and then inshallah ta'ala on the Day of Judgment, you find that you're scooted and you find yourself next to Imam Ibn Rajab. And you say, how did I get here? You love that person for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Right? So this is something very significant. Now, what should you do if you love someone for Allah? You should tell them. And I know it gets really, awkward sometimes for some people, especially in some cultures, to say I love you. And no, I'm not encouraging brothers and sisters to say I love you for the sake of Allah to each other. Right? But at least brothers, inshallah, and sisters, separately, inshallah ta'ala, you say to one another today as you're leaving, أحبك في الله. I love you for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Abdullah ibn Amr radiallahu ta'ala anhu, he narrates that Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam said, anyone who loves his brother for Allah should tell him. And the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam said, and they will both enter into Jannah. And he said, the one who has love for someone for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, meaning the one who loves for Allah, has a degree over the one he loves for Allah because of his love for Allah. I know that you guys probably missed that. Because the one who loves for Allah, loves that person only for Allah, he has a higher degree in the sight of Allah than the one that he loves. Okay, now obviously this is only achieved with certain people. You can't do that with everybody. Anas ibn Malik radiallahu anhu, he says even one time, this is narrated in Abi Dawood's authentic hadith, that a man was with the Prophet ﷺ and he saw one of the other companions. He said, Ya Rasulullah, I love that man. The Prophet ﷺ says, did you tell him? And he said, no. The Prophet ﷺ said, go and tell him. So he says, فَلَحِقَهُ. So he went and he chased him down. And he said, قَالَ إِنِّي أَحِبُّكَ فِي اللَّهِ. That I love you for Allah. فَقَالَ أَحَبَّكَ الَّذِي أَحْبَبْتَنِي لَهُ. May the one who you love me for, love you back. Okay? Or you could say, أَحَبَّكَ الَّذِي أَحْبَبْتَنِي فِي. Or you could say, أَحَبَّكَ الَّذِي أَحْبَبْتَنِي مِنْ أَجْلِي. Okay? May the one who you love me for, love you back. Okay? So inshallah ta'ala, this is an assignment for everybody. Before you leave, those of you that are present, tell someone in here that you love them for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And if you're not here, call someone, send a text message to someone that you love for Allah, and tell them, I really love you for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And inshallah ta'ala, that would strengthen the bond. The Prophet ﷺ, he also said in authentic hadith, just to summarize this topic, in Sunnah Tirmidhi, the Prophet ﷺ, he said that Dawood alayhi salam used to make a dua. So the Prophet ﷺ said, and we should make this dua as well. He says, Dawood used to say, Allahumma inni as'aluka hubbak. Allahumma inni as'aluka hubbak. Oh Allah, I ask you for your love. Wa hubba man yuhibbuk. And the love of those who love you. Wa hubba, wal amal alladhi yuballighuni hubbak. And for the action that will cause me to be loved by you. Then he said, Allahumma ja'al hubbaka ahabba ilayya min nafsi. Oh Allah, make your love more beloved to me than myself, wa ahli wa min al-ma'il barid. And more beloved to me than my family and even cold water on a hot day. And the Prophet ﷺ, he ended, as he taught us this dua, he said that Dawood alayhi salam was the best of Allah's worshippers. And Khairul Abidin, Dawood alayhi salam was a beautiful worshipper. So we take lessons obviously in his qiyam and his siyam, and this is one of the du'as. Now, the categories now as we transition into the last one for the night. Notice that the first four are fearing Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala with a group of people. Okay? The next two are fearing Allah when dealing with one person, and the last one is fearing Allah when you're all alone. So now, the transition. Allah Azza wa Jalla says, وَاصْبِرْ نَفْسَكَ مَعَ الَّذِينَ يَدْعُونَ رَبَّهُمْ بِالْغَدَاةِ وَالْعَشِيِّ. Make yourself patient. Keep yourself patient by worshipping alongside those who call upon Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the morning and in the evening, يُرِيدُونَ وَجْهَ, only seeking His pleasure subhanahu wa ta'ala. So the next category is someone who's approached by a person of beauty. ذَاتَ مَنْصِبٍ وَجَمَالٍ فَقَالَ إِنِّي أَخَافُ اللَّهِ. He's approached by someone of beauty and status, for zina, for adultery, and he says, I fear Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. How do you get that? You keep yourself patient, especially for young people. You keep yourself patient with your brothers or your sisters. So underline, مَعَ الَّذِينَ يَدْعُونَ رَبَّهُمْ بِالْغَدَاةِ وَالْعَشِيِّ. That are worshipping where? In the masajid. So that category is there as well. And this applies especially to youth, especially to young people. Right? Young people are most tempted with this sin. And so the category before that was شَابٌ نَشَأَ عَلَى طَاعَةِ اللَّهِ, or نَشَأَ فِي ذِكْرِ اللَّهِ. Young person who grew up worshipping Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So keep yourself patient, worshipping alongside your brothers and sisters, so that when you're tempted with your desires, you're able to say, I fear Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Yusuf alayhi salam, who we said is the only person, by the way, Yusuf alayhi salam is the only man in history that falls in all 7 of these categories. Yusuf is in each one of these categories. Okay, from Imam al-Adil to the one that cried when he was alone. Okay, but he is the ultimate example of this category. Why? Because Yusuf alayhi salam had half of beauty inside of him. Imagine how beautiful Yusuf alayhi salam was. And a beautiful woman of status and power, who was also the wife of his master, shuts all the doors and throws herself at him. وَلَقَدْ هَمَّتْ بِي وَهَمَّ بِهَا. And Allah Azza wa Jalla tells us, she desired him, he desired her. He was a man, alayhi salam. As a man, he desired her as well. And he feared Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and he tried to escape from the wife of Al-Aziz. And she tore his shirt even, subhanAllah. And Yusuf alayhi salam tried to get away from her, and Allah subhanahu, and he said, I would rather go to prison, in a sijn, that verily, sijn, ahabbu ilayh. I'd rather go to prison than do what she's calling me to. So subhanAllah, the sincerity of Yusuf alayhi salam. Allah Azza wa Jalla also describes Yahya alayhi salam. He says, وَسَيِّدًا وَحَصُورًا. That Yahya alayhi salam was a leader and he was modest, hasura. Al-hasur is الَّذِي لَا يُرِيدُ النِّسَاء, the one who doesn't desire women. So it's not literal here, but rather Yahya alayhi salam kept himself away from zina, and that's why he was killed alayhi salam. If you read the history of him, Allahu a'lam if you can confirm things fully, but the most detailed account, the most common account of Yahya alayhi salam is that the king, Herod, wanted to marry his niece. And, he said, just tell the rabbis to say it's halal. Yahya alayhi salam was a alim of the Torah. He said it's haram. So the king sent the niece. She said, let me go and tempt him and seduce him. Yahya alayhi salam paid no attention to it. Right? And that's why he was killed, according to several historical accounts. This includes men and women. So we find, for example, the story of the Prophet ﷺ, when he mentioned in Al-Bukhari 3 men who were stuck in a cave. And a rock enclosed them, and basically they all made dua to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala with something that they did out of sincerity. And the second person, he said that I had a cousin. And he said, وَكَانَتْ أَحَبُّ النَّاسِ إِلَيْهِ. She was the most beloved of people to me. I loved her more than anyone else. I desired her more than any man could love a woman. And he said, I used to always try to seduce her, and she would refuse. And he said, until famine came to our town, and she was in hardship, so she approached me for help. And I gave her 120 dinars on the condition that she would commit zina with me. So he said that she agreed, and he said that when we got together, so subhanAllah, he reached a point where he says he was about to actually commit the act of zina. He said just as he was about to commit the act of zina, she said, ittaqillah, fear Allah, and do not break the seal unlawfully. So he says, as soon as she said that, he said, I got up and I left, and he said, Allah, you know how much I desired her. And he said, I even took the money and I gave it back to her. He said, oh Allah, if you know that I did this only for your sake, then free us from this cave. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala caused the rock to move a little bit more. So subhanAllah, there's a fear of Allah from this man and this woman. When they were tested in the heat of a moment, they still said, I fear Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Imam al-Dhahabi rahimahullah, he also says that one time, there was a woman, this story is widely narrated in the books of Tazkiyah, and a man took her out to the desert, and a man was about to approach her for zina. And he said to her, don't worry, لا يرانا إلا الكواكب. Look, no one sees us except for the stars tonight. The only ones that are looking at us tonight are the stars. And she responded and said, فَأَيْنَ مُكَوْكِبُهَا? Where is the one who made the stars? So subhanAllah, when you don't develop a fear of Allah, when you're all alone and you have this chance, then you're not going to fear Him, because you haven't developed it through the masajid, through worshipping Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, through remembering Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, through making relationships for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Now, the people of knowledge in particular, Ahlul Ilm. Now, in the beginning of the lecture, I mentioned the statement of Sufyan al-Thawri in the beginning of this class, Sinfani min al-nas, that there are two groups of people. Either saluha, if they are righteous, everyone will be righteous, and if they are wicked, everyone will be wicked, and they are the leaders and the scholars. If they are righteous, everyone else is righteous. If they are corrupt, everyone else becomes corrupt. So we find particularly in the history, shaitan tries to approach ulama and students of knowledge. And subhanAllah, it's the downfall of a person many times to do the act of a zina. Some of them, no chance. Imam ibn Sirin rahimahullah ta'ala, he says, shaitan used to come to me with a beautiful woman in my dream. وَأَعْلَمُ أَنَّهَا لَا تُحِلُّ لِي. And I knew that she wasn't halal for me. Now by the way, in your dream, do you have to lower your gaze? No. You're not going to be punished if you didn't lower your gaze in your dream. Okay? But he said, I would see a woman in my dream. Shaitan would tempt me with a beautiful woman in my dream. وَأَعْلَمُ أَنَّهَا لَا تُحِلُّ لِي. And I knew that she wasn't halal for me. فَأَصْرِفُ بَصَرِي. I'd look away even in my dream. I wouldn't let him get me even in my dream. And subhanAllah, we find, I'll leave you guys with two stories. Number one, there is a Sahabi by the name of Ubayd ibn Umayr, radiyallahu ta'ala anhu. And Ubayd ibn Umayr, radiyallahu ta'ala anhu, was a great scholar from the Sahaba. Ibn Omar, radiyallahu anhu, used to attend his gatherings, and he used to give heavy lectures. He used to make the people cry all the time. Aisha, radiyallahu anha, had to tell him to calm down because his lectures were so heavy. Everyone cried in his lectures, right? And so there was a woman, a beautiful woman in Mecca, and one day she's with her husband and she's looking in the mirror, and she says, لا يرى أحد هذا الوجه إلا افتتن. She's saying to her husband, no one would see this beautiful face, she's bragging, except that he would be seduced and corrupted. So the man responded to his wife, he said, yeah, except for one person. She said, who? He said, Ubayd ibn Umayr. She said, listen, subhanAllah, look at how evil this is. She says, فَأْذَنِّي فِيهِ لَأُفْتِنَنَّ. Sorry. Give me permission to go to him and seduce him. Let me give it a shot. So the husband actually told the wife, go ahead, give it a shot. So she went to Ubayd ibn Umayr and she acted like she was asking him for fatwa. And then she walked close to him and she uncovered her face. And she had a very beautiful face. And she gave him a sign that she wanted him. So Ubayd ibn Umayr, he responded and he said, Ittaqillah ya amat Allah. Fear Allah, O servant of Allah. And she responded to him and she said, Inni qad futintu bika fanzur fi amri. She said, listen, I'm attracted to you, fulfill my need. And Ubayd ibn Umayr, he said, okay, fine. He said, I'm going to ask you some questions. He said, if you answer these questions right, I'll fulfill your need. She said, go ahead. He said, when the angel of death comes to you to take your soul, will you be pleased if I fulfilled your need? She said, Allahumma la. She said, by Allah, no. And he says, sadaqti, you've told the truth. And he said, and when you're buried and the angel sits you up to question you, will you be will you be happy if I would have fulfilled your need? She said, Allahumma la. By Allah, no. He said, Sadaqti, you've spoken the truth. And he said, and if you're walking across the sirat and you don't know if you're going to cross safely because the hook might come and pull you into Jahannam, would you be happy if I fulfilled your need? She said in a louder voice, Allahumma la. She's getting frightened. By Allah, no. He said, Sadaqti. And he said, and when the mizan, when the scales are brought forth, and you see that evil sin in your scales, would you be happy that I would have fulfilled your need? She said, Allahumma la. By Allah, no. He said, Sadaqti. And he said, and tell me when you stand before Allah and Allah shows you that need, shows you that desire being fulfilled, would it please you that I would have fulfilled your need? She said, Allahumma la. Allahumma la. Allahumma la. She said 3 times, by Allah, no. By Allah, no. By Allah, no. He said, Sadaqti. Fattaqillah ya amatallah. He said, fear Allah, O servant of Allah. He said, فَقَدْ أَنْعَمَ اللَّهُ عَلَيْكِ وَأَحْسَنَ إِلَيْكِ. Allah has showed His blessings to you. وَأَحْسَنَ إِلَيْكِ. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala was excellent with you. Meaning Allah gave you so many blessings, your beauty, your wealth, everything. Fear Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So she made tawbah. And subhanAllah, she became a zahid. She became an ascetic. And she became one of his students, an abida. And her husband, he used to be heard in the middle of the night. He used to be complaining. He used to say, Mali wali Ubayd ibn Umayr. He said, what can I do about Ubayd ibn Umayr? Afsada alayhi imra'ati. He ruined my wife. She used to be like a bride every night. Now all she wants to do is worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So subhanAllah, and he's saying, Afsada alayhi imra'ati. He corrupted my wife. The final story that I'll give you all. And this, subhanAllah, is the most powerful story, because think about it. The odd thing about this category is that you didn't do anything good. You just avoided something bad. You showed that you were in control of your temptations, and you avoided something that was harmful. So you prove your sincerity to Allah. As Allah Azza wa Jalla says, أُولَٰئِكَ الَّذِينَ امْتَحَنَ اللَّهُ قُلُوبَهُمْ لِلتَّقْوَى. They are the people who Allah tested their hearts for faith. Allah put them to the test. This narration is from Ibn Kathir. It's also narrated from Muhammad Siddiq al-Minshawi in the stories of Umar al-Khattab radiallahu anhu. It's an authentic narration. That Ibn Kathir rahimahullah, he says, Shadun fi ahdi Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. He said there was a young man in the time of the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, يُلَازِمُ الْمَسْجِدِ لِيَسْمَعِ الْحَدِيثِ. That he would always be in the masjid, لِيَسْمَعِ الْحَدِيثِ غَضًّا طَرِيًّا مِنْ أَفْوَاهِ الصَّحَابَةِ رِضْوَانُ اللَّهِ تَعَالَى عَلَيْهِمْ. That he used to always be in the masjid so he could hear what was being narrated by all of the companions of the Prophet ﷺ. قال فأعجب به عمر. He said Umar radiallahu anhu particularly took interest in this young man. And he became a student of Umar ibn Khattab radiallahu anhu. وَكَانَ لَهُ أَبٌ شَيْخٌ. And he had an old father. And he said, so he started to study with Umar radiallahu ta'ala anhu. And he always used to stay in the masjid. But every night before he would go home, he would go and he would visit his father. وَكَانَ عَلَى طَرِيقِهِ إِمْرَأَةً. And on the way to his father's house, there was a beautiful young woman. So she used to call him every single day as he was passing by. Baghiyya, she was an adulteress. She used to call him every day. Come on, come on, come on, come on. SubhanAllah, one moment, Allah, he had weak iman. One moment, he listened. And he went towards her. And SubhanAllah, فَلَمَّا أَرَادَ أَنْ يَدْخُلُ الْبَيْتِ خَلْفَهَا. Whenever he was just about to enter the house behind her, تَذَكَّرَ قَوْلَ اللَّهِ. He remembered an ayah from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's Quran. You see here what the other categories do, preparing yourself in the masjid with your brothers and sisters and remembering Allah Azza wa Jal. He remembered Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, إِنَّ الَّذِينَ اتَّقَوْا إِذَا مَسَّهُمْ طَائِفٌ مِنَ الشَّيْطَانِ تَذَكَّرُوا فَإِذَا هُمْ مُبْصِرُونَ. Said those that truly fear Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, whenever the shaitan touches them, whenever the shaitan tempts them, they remember Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and their sight is restored to them. So he remembered that ayah. فَخَرَّ مَغْشِيًّا عَلَيْهِ. So he fainted in front of the door of that woman. So it says, the narration says, فَحُمِّلَ إِلَىٰ أَبِيهِ. The people saw him passed out in front of this woman's house. She closed the door. So they picked him up and they took him to his father. And he woke up after 1/3 of the night had passed. And his father asked him, what happened? What happened to you? So he started to tell his father the story. And then his father said, and what made you stop? So he said, تَذَكَّرْتُ قَوْلَ اللَّهِ. He said, I remembered Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's words. إِنَّ الَّذِينَ اتَّقَوْا. And he fainted again. But this time he died. SubhanAllah, this is in the time of Umar al-Khattab radiallahu ta'ala anhu. he died as he was remembering the ayah that he remembered, which protected him from committing zina in that moment. And so his father thought that maybe he was just fainted, so he called some people. They shook him, they pinched him. He never woke up. And in the morning, Umar ibn Khattab radiallahu anhu was deeply grieved. Umar radiallahu ta'ala anhu was the one who did his ghusl. This was his student. And then Umar radiallahu ta'ala anhu prayed janazah on him. And Umar ibn Khattab radiallahu ta'ala anhu was the one who went in the grave and received his body and put it inside the grave. And when Umar ibn Khattab radiallahu ta'ala anhu came out and they buried him, Umar radiallahu ta'ala anhu, he was crying. And he called out and he said, Ya fata. He said, "O young man, وَلِمَنْ خَافَ مَقَامَ رَبِّهِ جَنَّتَانِ." As for the one who feared the standing before his Lord, he has 2 gardens in Jannah. And you know what happens? The man called back out to him. فَأَجَابَهُ الْفَتَى مِنْ قَبْرِهِ. And actually the name of this narration is شَابٌ يَتَحَدَّثْ مِنْ قَبْرِهِ, a young man who spoke from his grave. And a voice was heard. فَأَجَابَهُ الْفَتَى مِنْ قَبْرِهِ يَا عُمَرْ قَدْ أَعْطَانِيهِمَا رَبِّي مَرَّتَيْنِ. Allah has given me those 2 gardens twice. Subhanallah. For the first time he feared Allah, and the second time he feared Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So sometimes what gets you is really that moment of temptation, but you fear Allah Azza wa Jal, and that moment of strength is what will protect you. And that moment of saying, "Akhaf Allah," I'm afraid of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, is greater in the sight of Allah. Think about it. He's in the same level as Imamun Adil, as a ruler, and people that did amazing things in their lives. But he feared Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for that one moment. And what saved him? Again, his growing up in the masjid around righteous people. It gave him the courage at that moment to turn it down. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to grant us true taqwa, and to make us patient, and to make us love the masajid, and to bring us closer to the people of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and to make us love and hate only for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Inshallah ta'ala, next week we will continue on the last categories, inshallah ta'ala, and we will finish up. Inshallah, I apologize once again to the online viewers. We don't have time for questions till the Salat al-Isha. So please make dua, and we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to bless us with true taqwa, and we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to grant us His shade on a day when there is no shade except for His, and we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to grant us light on a day when there is no light except for the light of sincerity and the light that He gives to His believing servants. Allahumma ameen. أقول قولي هذا وأستغفر الله لي ولكم. والسلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.